here. Okay, awesome. So I'm gonna just start us out with a little introduction here for you. Welcome to Peter White Public Library, and most of you know me. I'm Marty Atkinson. I'm the Adult Programming Coordinator for Peter White, and I'm honored to be introducing tonight's presenter for this month's Authors Reading Virtually, T. Marie Bertineau, author of the 2021 Michigan Notable Book, the memoir, The Mason House, which was published by Lanternfish Press. I first met Marie back at the end of September in Calumet, Michigan this year. This is how this all came about. Both she and I were appearing on the radio show, the Red Jacket Jamboree. She was the featured author for the episodes that we were recording that month. And what I remember most about those shows is sitting on the stage and listening to her read her excerpts from The Mason House. And I had a performer's eye view of the audience as Marie shared her work. And it was like pin drop silence, and every person there was like enthralled listening to Marie's tales that she shared. And it was like watching her perform magic, and that magic was conjuring people and places out of thin air and making us care about them, even though we'd never met them. And by the time she was done, it is felt as though we had known them our whole lives. And that's the kind of writer that Marie is. So she was born amidst the copper mining ruins of Michigan's Upper Peninsula. She's an Indigenous author of Ojibwe, Anishinaabe, and French Canadian Cornish descent. She is a member of the Keweenaw Indian community of the Lance Reservation, Migizi Udodaman. I knew I was going to screw that up. Udodaman. Thank you. Her work has appeared online with Minnesota's Carver County Arts Consortium in Minnow-Mikana, publication of the Native Justice Coalition and Wabajijek Press, and in the annual journal UP Reader. Marie's quarterly column, Hankies in My Pocket, Tender Thoughts from the Keweenaw, can be found on carrotranch.com, home of the Carrot Ranch literary community. And if you've never visited that site, you really should. It's a really wonderful site. Her debut memoir, The Mason House, from Lanternfish Press, was published in 2020 and was named a 2021 Michigan Notable Book by the Library of Michigan. And if you're looking to get it from Peter White Public Library, put yourself on the reserve list, because it's been difficult for people to get it. There's always someone waiting to get their hands on it. So that's a huge compliment to Marie's work. So she is married and a mother of two, and she makes her home in the Keweenaw Peninsula. So please join me in welcoming Peter White to Peter White Public Library, Michigan notable author T. Marie Bertineau. Thank you.
Thank you, Marty. I appreciate that introduction. I'm going to follow that up just briefly with one, a short one in Anishinaabe-Moin, because I am a student of my grandparents' language, and I'm trying to, I'm trying to get better at my introduction, so I do it whenever I can. It's good for me to practice. So that's what I would like to do first before I get started. So Marie Bertineau, I should start. Bojo Kinawea, Marie Bertineau, Indigenous, Mikisian Dodem, Wabishki, Wabikwanikwe, Anishinaabe Noswin, and Wikwedunk Indibendagos. And what I said there was, hello everyone. I am called T. Marie Bertineau. I am Eagle Clan. My Ojibwe name is White Water Lily Woman, and I am a member of KBIC. So with the season and all the snow we just recently had, and with it being December, Marty had asked if I would read something from my book that deals with the holidays. And so there were a couple of chapters in the Mason House that did deal with it. And amazingly enough, when I started looking at that, they were from opposite ends of the book. So it's kind of nice because you'll get a flavor for what my youth was like, and then you'll we'll fast forward to adulthood, and you'll see that things are very different with my family at that time. And that's what the book is about, basically, is all the changes that occurred from childhood to adulthood. And most of that surrounded around my grandma, around the Mason house, around her passing, and my family's struggles after that event. So I have my candle going for Christmas. I have tea, so everyone just relax and enjoy. And we'll start off with a chapter called Gifts of Grace. Even amidst dysfunction, magic can exist. Such was the case for our family. Despite the alcoholism and grief, there was still tradition. And part of that tradition, a part which to me was magical, was our unabashed celebration of the holidays. It was nearly Christmas, 1971, and the only gift beneath Grandma's tree was a carton of Pall Malls. It was wrapped in holiday paper, but even a child could figure out what it was, since the one thing her grandma always wanted most at Christmas was cigarettes, and that was what she usually got, year after year. I stomped in through the shed in my snow boots, carrying my contribution to the sparse gift display. Earlier that week, Dad and Mom had given us each a small allotment of cash for Christmas shopping. One night, after dark, Mom had driven us to Houghton, the metropolis just across the portage. She had pulled up alongside the curb to let us out while she ran errands around town. "Watch your sister," she had called to Janie from inside the car. "Hold her hand." I looked up at Janie that night as she grasped my mittened hand, her black hair glistening with snowflakes that appeared to sift down from the streetlights overhead. She was old enough to leave the house without a chook in the winter, but I had on my stocking cap with the spray of red yarn at its tip. We traipsed through the mountainous snowbanks between the parking meters, scurrying from storefront to storefront, but we struggled to find what we wanted. "We're going to Newberry's," Janie finally declared. "That's the best." Newberry's was to shoppers what the Motherlode was to miners. It was vast and bright and sold most everything I'd ever seen in catalogs and on TV commercials. It was also cheap. She held the glass door for me as I slipped in beneath her arm. We crossed the boot-tracked, hollow-sounding floor to the women's section, a jungle of clothing racks, shoes and carousels, and tables adorned with costume jewelry. "You'll find something here," she said with a quick, confident nod. We milled about for a moment before settling on a 3-foot square table teetering with small gift boxes. There were bracelets, screw-on earrings, necklaces, and fancy hairpins, each nestled in a square of white sponge. One stack held large brooches, which looked to me like something a grandmother would wear. I rummaged through the pile, opening the box tops and studying each piece with a discerning eye. Finally, it appeared, the perfect one. It was oval in shape, with a white porcelain-like background. On its face was printed an elaborate French woman, like Marie Antoinette, in a blue-gray costume with a dazzling plume of feathers billowing from her head. She looked sassy and elegant, like Grandma did when she washed her hair with White Rain shampoo. Adding to its pretentiousness was an antiqued metal setting to which the glass oval had been shoddily affixed. I looked at the sign in the chrome stand above the table. It read $1. That was exactly what I was allotted for Grandma's gift. Janie loaned me a few pennies for the tax, and my shopping was complete. I now kicked off my boots in Graham's kitchen, gift in hand, and made a beeline to the Christmas tree in the far corner of the front room. It was an artificial pine, about 3 feet tall, towering above the wooden parlor table where she normally kept the record player. That tree had always seemed a little sad to me. Dad harvested a real tree, fresh from the woods, for the Hubble house. Gram didn't seem to mind her tree, though. The synthetic evergreen twinkled with small multicolored lights, a glass topper, and a few silvery brown bulbs with spiraled cutouts in their bellies, painted red and green. "I bought you a Christmas present," I announced. I had never bought her a gift before. Mom and Dad must have encountered a windfall of some sort. I placed it next to the wrapped carton of cigarettes. "I picked it out all by myself." "Oh, honey, you didn't need to spend money on Grandma like that." "They said I could. Mom took us to Houghton." "Well, that was real nice. I'll have a very Merry Christmas." She was sitting on the couch, and when I bent to kiss her hello, she patted my side. "Be sure to thank your ma and dad for me, too. Money's hard to come by these days." It was mid-afternoon. The Secret Storm was on television. I didn't pay much attention to soap operas. Too boring for me. But once in a while, Grandma watched them, though she seemed to prefer game shows. The Christmas tree was still dark, awaiting dusk when we would plug it in. "What do you want Santa to bring you?" she asked. The Secret Storm had ended and a string of toy commercials began. "You know," I said, smiling. I had been telling her and everyone else who would listen how badly I wanted the new Malibu Barbie for Christmas. My cousin Lisa and I had both had that Barbie at the top of our list since our first glimpse of the television commercial. "I know," she said, grinning, "a Barbie doll." "The Malibu Barbie. It has to be that one." "Were you a good girl this year?" "Yeah," I nodded. "I was good." Or at least I tried to be. On Christmas morning, my eyes popped open in my Hubble bedroom, my gut flip-flopping with the joy and excitement of the day. Katie was already awake, glued to the bedroom door. The previous afternoon, that door had been fitted on the opposing side with a small hook and eye, so we couldn't come out until our parents were up and the coffee ready. It was Dad who had devised the lock plot. I'd watched him screw the hardware into the jamb. He had fashioned the hook himself out of a small strip of copper he retrieved from Grandma Nelson's cellar. "What's that for?" I asked. His lips gripped a smoldering dowel, and the white stick seesawed as he mumbled his answer. "To keep you two monkeys in your room until your ma and I are ready for you." It seemed like an elaborate measure, but if there was one thing Dad and Mom didn't want to miss, it was the look on our faces when we first saw the tree on Christmas morning. "Did Santa come?" Katie whispered, her eyes sparkling like tinsel, her hair amuck like a woolly willy. "I hope so." I rolled onto my belly and slid over the edge of the top bunk until my toes skimmed the mattress below and sank down onto the cold floor. The Rambler didn't have a cellar. It was set on a cement slab. "Are they up? Can you open the door?" Katie tried to pull the door open, but met resistance. I went and gave it a good wiggle myself. She pulled at the door again and called out through the tiny crack of light, "I need to go to the bathroom." Her speech had improved through the years, but she still struggled with certain consonants. From across the hall came Dad's voice. Yeah, we hear ya." Despite the fact Christmas was his favorite time of year, he wasn't a morning person. Suddenly, his whiskered face appeared in the crack of the edge of the door. "Ho, ho, ho." Katie and I squealed and bounced. She forgot all about going to the bathroom. All she cared about now was getting to the tree. Within minutes came the burp of the percolator. The odor of Dad's Doral wafted down the hall. It wouldn't be long now. As soon as he paid his morning visit to the John, we'd be good to go. Christmas mornings in the Hubble house were pure chaos. It was hard to rein us in from attacking the pile of colorfully wrapped gifts beneath our tree. It was one of the few times of year we got anything new. We would sprint to the living room, drop to our knees in our threadbare pajamas, and toss packages until we found our own gifts. After devouring everything under our tree, sometimes we'd be led into Grandma Nelson's part of the house. There would be gifts in there as well. One year, a red bicycle awaited me, and Katie, a dollhouse. This year, the only thing I wanted to find anywhere was that Malibu Barbie. We heard Anne and Jamie's voices in the kitchen. Dad said he was about ready. That was all we needed. Before he even made it to the bedroom to lift the lock, Katie and I both gave the door a good yank. The wire hook gave way and the door swung wide. We burst out and clambered past him, all his planning for naught. Katie was screaming, I was screaming. Mom was laughing about the broken lock. I dove under our glistening tree, its bubble lights just beginning to simmer, seeking the first gift I could find addressed to me from Santa. It seemed I found everyone else's before I finally uncovered my own. I tore at it, hoping I'd chosen the right one. Thank God for Santa. It was the doll I'd been praying for, Malibu Barbie, dressed in a light blue one-piece bathing suit. It's her, it's her. What'd you get, Mom asked. She had roosted behind us on the couch in her housecoat and scuffs. She was sipping coffee from a steaming cup of white milk glass with gold trim and a leafy wheat pattern. Malibu Barbie! I spun and held it high. Santa brought it! Katie pressed against me, oogling the contents of the pink bubble pack. She's gonna be cold, Dad said, and he and Mom laughed. They were always happy on Christmas. Beer was never allowed. My new Barbie was out of sight. She had tan skin and long blonde hair. Atop her head perched a pair of round sunglasses tinted lilac. She was real Maud. She didn't come with street clothes, only a miniature terry cloth towel with fringed ends in bright yellow. Barbie clothes were expensive, and I'd left them off my list intentionally, just in case I was asking too much. I didn't want to take any chances. When most of the gifts were unwrapped, someone uncovered a remaining one addressed to me. It had been pushed behind the tree stand, its top sprinkled with fallen needles. I could smell the balsam scent as I slid it toward me. Santa breath. It's from Grandma, I said. Oh, Mom said. I was wondering what happened to that one. Inside the wrapping paper was a plain white shoebox, and within, layers of handmade Barbie clothes. There was a red overcoat with miniature pearly buttons on the placket, a crocheted winter hat, a blue jumper, pajamas, pedal pushers, 2 pairs of culottes, a glittery blouse and pencil skirt, and at the bottom of the pile, a bridal ensemble that included a white lace dress with a veil and a pink bridesmaid gown with a shawl. I would never have asked for so much. A day or so passed, and I was in Mason for the remainder of Christmas break. I stood in the kitchen while Grandma prepared supper. Did you like the brooch, I asked? Oh yeah, that was real pretty. I'll have to get all dolled up one of these days. She gave me one of her click winks. Gram was a real looker when she dressed up. Even Mom said so. I love my Barbie clothes, Graham. How'd you know I needed them? She shrugged. Your mom thought that might be a good idea. She just had a feeling. She said she'd stashed some money aside and had a woman she knew make them for her. Like Mom and Dad, Grandma didn't have much money. The thought leapt up and nipped me, smack dab in the middle of my rib cage, in the place where I laid my palm for the Pledge of Allegiance. I didn't like the idea of Gram spending what little she had on doll clothes. For a moment, just one moment, I wish she hadn't spent her money on me that way. So that's the end of that chapter, Gifts of Grace. Early on in the book, from the first part. And then we're going to skip ahead. Probably about, let's see, this happened when I was about 30, I think. So 20 years later, 2 decades, we're going to pick up with another Christmas in the UP. This chapter is called Memory. It was the mid-90s, the holiday season. Noah, Jackie, and I had made the long trip from Oklahoma City to the UP to spend Christmas with my family. We were staying with Janie and her new husband, Kurt, a Copper Country fellow born and bred. We spent Christmas Eve at Janie's place, opening gifts and enjoying appetizers. But on Christmas Day, the entire family was scheduled to be at Mom's for gift opening and dinner. A couple years earlier, finished with treatment but still on edge, Mom had decided to put down roots in the Copper Country. She purchased an old, coal-dusted mining-style house south of Houghton, one she'd found listed for sale in the Copper Nugget, a local sales paper. Want to come take a look at this house I found? She asked Anne on the phone one afternoon. I'm thinking about buying it. They drove up a winding forest-lined hill to the tiny mining community. The homes were tall and square, in varied stages of remodeling, with a few projects stalled, half finished. Not unusual in the area. Money was tight. When they reached the address, they climbed the steep dirt drive to the lemon yellow house, a vintage box with a steeply pitched roof sheltered by tall, arcing pines. You sure you want to buy this? Anne asked. She feared to venture too far inside. The walls were thick with black dust, the floors like an ash pan. But Mom was undeterred. She was no stranger to living quarters in need of cleanup, and she was energized by her ability to secure the small loan. Before long, she held the keys in hand. She scrubbed the place down and gave the old house new life. It was her first home purchase, one she'd managed all on her own. And she was darn proud of her accomplishment. I'd been to her place once before. She'd hosted a picnic over the 4th of July holiday where we chatted casually, though I was guarded. It was as though a cold gray blade now hovered over us. It threatened me like a guillotine. I feared that should it be agitated, it might slice me clean through, put an end to me. And so I left it undisturbed. Through the years, that blade had become my shadow, not to be shaken. Christmas night, we gathered in the small living area of the mining house. It was a narrow rectangle with a high window, a low sofa against one wall, and a television on the other. Senior portraits of my siblings and me hung above the couch. In the corner, the tree was dressed in familiar fashion. Mama's tree, the tree of my youth. All tinsel wrapped in dripping icicles, multicolored bulbs reflecting memories of Santa. Mom stood beside it, eyes sparkling, spirit beaming, dispensing the gifts she'd purchased. Grandkids squealed and giggled, camouflaged in heaps of crumpled wrapping paper. Katie squealed too, happy to be with Mom on Christmas. Stacks of open gifts towered around us, bows accumulated in a plastic bag at Mom's side. She would reuse them in the coming years. Some things never change. "Oh, this one's for you, Treese," Mom said, and handed me a small box with a polypropylene bow. I was standing nearby and began peeling the bow from the top, picking at the taped points of holiday paper. Beneath the paper was a box, and within the box, a small acrylic piano. "Here," Mom said. She took the piano from my hand, flipped it over, and wound the golden key on its underbelly. The delicate ping of a tune commenced. Instantly, I recognized it. Memory from Cats. She handed it back to me. "When you play it, I hope you'll think of me." It was a short phrase, but a complex one, drenched in sorrow, remorse, grief, all wrapped up in 10 little words, all pooled in her hopeful eyes. Up to that moment, I had not known about my own well of tears, the depth of it, or how it shimmered, waiting so close to my surface. I was unaware of the sorrow I harbored, how I'd come to exist on its fringes, treading a narrow strip of beach, heels digging in. It all revealed itself right there in front of my family on Christmas night, soaking my cheeks, stealing my breath. And my shadow began its slow dissolve. So that is the end of that chapter. So 2 very different pictures of this book, The Mason House. So I thought,
what year were those, the first and the second one?
1971, I believe, was the Malibu Barbie Christmas.
Okay.
And then the late 90s was the other one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I could relate to those. I came from a dysfunctional family,
Mm-hmm.
and my family wasn't very emotional, didn't show a lot of emotion. But when you mentioned there was in the first reading, there was something about, I think it was your grandmother touched you. She touched your shoulder. My aunts would do that. For me, that was like a hug.
Mm-hmm.
To have someone touch you on your shoulder or touch you on your knee.
Right.
That was like a hug. And the things that she said, I can't think of the phrase, but it's an old time phrase, something that someone would have said a grandmother would have said, a saying or a little quip that they used.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
it's often the little things that you think those things are gone and past, and then you pull out something, an item, especially, I think at Christmas time too, an ornament or something that just brings you to tears.
Right, exactly. Yeah. That's what memoir, I was amazed by the emotion of writing memoir. I never expected to write memoir. I was really interested in fiction. So when I set out to write that book, the emotional experiences were really overwhelming at times to go back there. Mm-hmm. Okay, that is all I plan to read out of the Mason House. And let's see, it's 7:33. I can try, I have like I'll try to get through this one without going too fast. This is called the Kalamazoo, It was originally, the material was intended for the Mason house because the wood stove in the Mason house was such an important part of that home and such a huge part of our life. And so I had included a chapter dedicated to that stove in the book, but it didn't make it in the published, in the final copy. So I ended up reworking that chapter a bit, and then it was published in UP Reader, the 4th edition. And so I'm going to read I guess that for y'all, if that's okay.
Sure.
Call of the Kalamazoo. I was 8 years old when I rebelled against the Kalamazoo, or at least I think I was. That's what I recall about the old wood stove with the chipped porcelain, which was parked like a Sherman tank in Grandma's Keweenaw kitchen. It was our winter warrior, our commander-in-chief. And as a frequent guest at Graham's house, I was, by default, born into its battalion. The roar of that stove taught me winter was the enemy, the season for combat. It was the time for stockpiled ammunition crafted of hardwoods, for donning woolly uniforms, for plopping bread-bagged feet into marching boots and trudging off to the attack, armed with scoops or shovels or rusted coal scuttles. Yes, some might say winter was a battle in the copper country, but if you ask the Kalamazoo, winter was full-out war. It all began one early fall. I remember a nickel sky, gold-plated leaves, a pinch in the air. My 2 older sisters and I stared at the mountain of scrap wood looming before us in the yard behind Grandma's house. Offcuts of raw flooring, which would be sacrificed as firewood in the coming months. Earlier in the week, in preparation for winter, a truck from Hoekstra's Hardwoods had dumped a load of maple, the first sign of things to come. The 6 to 8 inch pieces of tongue and groove had tumbled from the truck's scarred metal box in a frenzy of clacks and thwops, and were now heaped high in a dome, like a fortified beaver dam. It was our duty to throw the wood, to spend the next week or so tossing it into the cellar through a small window in the home's poor rock foundation. The scraps, in turn, would be hauled upstairs throughout the winter and burned in the Kalamazoo to heat Graham's old salt box, or headquarters, as the case may be. "This'll be worth pasties," my sister Janie said as she climbed to the top of the pile and began chucking handfuls of blonde blocks through the opening. We had worked on it a few days already, but there was still much to be done. Anne, the oldest, turned to me from her perch on the woodpile. "You're gonna help, eh?" "Yeah, I will." I smiled up at her from where I stood along the path to the outhouse, which had been worn to a narrow strip of dirt through the years. For me, anything was worth pasties, a dish rooted in Graham's Cornish heritage. Pasties were common fare in our diet. They were also a favored reward for a job well done. "Work hard," Graham would say, "and there'll be pasties for supper." That always took the sting out of chores. I say that we threw the wood, but truth be told, it was mostly Anne and Janie. They were the enlisted. I was still a cadet. I busied myself in the shadow of the overgrown burdock, sticker bush we called it, building pretend roads with the maple blocks, forgetting what it was we had come to do. No, I wasn't much help when it came to reducing the size of the woodpile, but I was good at spreading it out once it was inside the cellar. Anne called to me after they'd been at it a while. "Come kick the wood down," she said. The scraps they had tossed were at peak and needed to be leveled out. This is where I came in handy. Special forces. I was still wiry enough to fit through the cellar window, so I scurried to the top of the pile, straddled the opening. Janie pressed her hand to the crown of my head to keep me from bumping it on the window frame. "Watch for spiders," she said. "Keep talking," I said as I slid through, "so I won't be scared." Inside, I eyed the dim space. It was murky and desolate, lit only by 4 small windows, the panes laden with dust and grime. Only a faint light filtered through. It played tricks on my eyes and cast eerie shadows in far corners where I dared not venture. The air was thick and stale as a trench, and an earthy odor clung to my nostrils. Fear squeezed. "There's a lot of wood in here already," I called out in an effort to self-soothe. "We're doing good." "Well, we are anyway," I heard one of them mumble. I went right to work, crab crawling back and forth across the growing heap, heeling loose wood down the slope, widening the base and lowering the peak. After a bit, I stood up to gain a stronger kick. As a rookie, I tended to revert to haste. "You know what happens when you stand up too soon," Anne said, always the voice of reason. "I know, I'll be careful." No sooner had I spoken when the pile slipped out from under me and down I went on my backside, bruising my tailbone on the sharp cuts of wood. I grimaced and rubbed my rump. "Cripes!" "Cripes is a swear word, you know," Janie said. Mission complete, I squeezed back through the opening, which was more fun than using the cellar steps, and doubled back indoors to check on the pasty making. The aroma of fresh baked crust and tender root vegetables had seeped out into the porch shed. Inside, baking trays lined the stovetop, each covered with thin flour sack towels. I could make out the familiar D-shaped impressions of the pasties beneath. I had to hand it to that wood stove. It sure knew how to redeem itself. Seasons passed and winter had come to the copper country again. It never seemed to stray very far. I was dropped off alone at Graham's on a Friday after school to find the old Kalamazoo barking orders again. It had been back in commission for a couple of months now, an integral part of winter in that home. The white enameled appliance, divided into two parts, occupied the north wall of the kitchen. One side was comprised of a propane cooktop and oven, but the other side was the wood stove with its black cast iron top, which we learned early in life was hands off. A big stovepipe extended up the back of the unit and bent at a 90-degree angle through the chimney wall. A small coil on the pipe controlled the damper. One winter evening when Grandma fired up the stove, she forgot about the damper. "My eyes sting," I said, as a haze filled the rooms. "Cripes, I forgot the damn flue." She scampered to the kitchen to remedy the problem, batting the air as she went. Afterward, to clear the house, we opened the door to the porch shed, along with a couple of windows. Her storm windows were in place by then, but at their base were 3 holes which provided some ventilation once we poked out the back snow. The draft rushed in. Wood smoke and cold collided. "One of these days," she said in mock frustration, wielding a clenched fist in the direction of the wood stove. "Pow! Right in the kisser." That was the only time I ever saw Graham disrespect the Kalamazoo. Now Friday's snow was accumulating in the drive. I heard Mom gun the accelerator as she pulled out onto the highway. Graham was sitting in the living room watching the weather. "Ooh," she said, "we're supposed to get a big one next week. You'll have to stack the shed good for Grandma tomorrow." I rolled my eyes, hearing tomorrow's playtime would be sidelined by the Kalamazoo. During the school year, every Saturday after morning cartoons, we kids hauled wood from the cellar. First, we had to fill the big box behind the stove. But when the temperatures plummeted and snow mounted, the porch shed had to be stacked too, clear to the ceiling. The stove burned round the clock in the winter, and it seemed we could never keep enough wood upstairs to satisfy demand. "I wish Anne and Janie were here," I said. The work went faster with 3. "You're old enough now," Graham said. "You can do it. There'll still be plenty of time to play." Somehow I doubted that. That weekend, wood hauling became my nemesis, and the Kalamazoo nothing short of a tyrant. I descended into that cellar so many times, I lost count. I scaled steep steps with boxfuls of maple, heaped wood in the kitchen, stacked blocks for hours in the shed. Even the window disappeared behind the store of artillery. Resentment grew. I considered going AWOL. Who made that so boss anyway? I should have been out sledding. I should have been having fun. I decided right then and there, no matter how many pasties it baked, I was done with that wood stove. After that grueling weekend, the relationship between me and the Kalamazoo cooled. Everyone else may have been enamored with that old rust bucket, but I'd had enough of its dictatorship. Respect went by the wayside, and I thumbed my nose up at it each time I passed by. Until one snowy afternoon, when Graham stepped in to reconcile things. "There's something for you in the parlor," she said when I was dropped off on a Friday after school. I had come alone again that weekend. That was happening more and more. My sisters were teenagers now. I had regretfully moved up in rank. Around the corner on the seat of the upholstered rocker, I found a baggie of marbles, furies, cat's eyes, bumblebees, and even a boulder. I dropped to my knees and dumped them into the chair. They rolled toward the seat back, enchanting me with their delicate clickety-click as they puddled in the crevice of the seat cushion. I smoothed my fingertips over them, entranced by their swirl of color. "Where'd you get these?" I asked. All the kids had been shooting marbles at recess, but marbles cost money, and money didn't grow on trees, I'd been told. "IGA," she said. "They're for me? It wasn't even my birthday." "Yeah, you haul a lot of wood." I went to her where she stood in the doorway, wrapped my arms around her waist, burrowed my cheek in her pillowy chest, warm and cottony, like Mrs. Rabbit from the Beatrix Potter books. "Thanks, Graham. I never had marbles." In the next room, I heard the pop and crackle of the Kalamazoo, warming my limbs, toasting my toes. "Well done, soldier," it seemed to say. Perhaps I had been too hard on that old stove. That's the end of that one. And it's
Well-
7:46. Marty, do you want to stop there?
Well, we can do that. I was gonna say if anybody had any questions for Marie, I'm sure she'd be happy to answer any that you might have.
I assume you've been taking notes all throughout your life or in a journal?
Have I?
Yes, where you
No.
pull up all this stuff from the past.
No, I just remembered. I remembered it. I remembered all these details about my grandma's house that I would, when I began to write it, it wasn't like it was just sitting there all along, but once I began to write and kind of transport myself back to that era in my life, all those things came to me. And I just somehow had collected them inside.
Wow. That's incredible.
How long did it take you to write the Mason House? I mean, was it? I mean, it seems like there's like that. The chapters are so distinct. Some of them, like, did you write them? Did you write it as a full thing, or did it just come in those pieces as you were working on it?
That's a good question. It took me really a year to write the first draft of the book itself, but how I did it was by a memory that I had. Like, I had this very distinct memory, and then I built a chapter around that memory.
Okay.
So that's interesting that you noticed that.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, because each one is sort of like its own little essay. But I mean, and I've heard you read some other things from it as well at the Red Jacket and everything. So yeah, it's kind of amazing how they sort of build like that. And your grandma, I mean, in some ways, it's like the book seems like a love letter to your grandmother.
It,
I
it
mean,
was. It
yeah.
was definitely, that was the intent of that. My whole life, I had wanted to pay tribute to her because she meant so much to me. And I think if you read that book, you would know that that is basically what it is. It's dedicated to her. And she just had such an impact on my life. And the Mason house and my grandma was a place that I went for respite, from the struggles of my family home.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I wrote that for her. And when I first thought about that, all my life, I'm like, how could I pay tribute to my grandma, and writing a book to me was the greatest thing I could do. But I really thought I was going to write fiction. I was going to fictionalize her, because I felt safe doing that.
Yeah.
But once I started writing the story, the actual story in memoir, it was just, to me, why would I change it? Because I felt the story was so beautiful just the way it was. And so I just progressed with the memoir.
Yeah. And I mean, was it, were there any particular parts of it that you found difficult to write? Because I think that, like you said, as a writer, you sort of want to fictionalize things, especially if you're dealing with difficult subjects. But if you're writing memoir, you can't really turn away from difficult subjects sometimes. Yeah.
Well, there were two sides to that. Going back to my grandma's house, to those very early memories with my grandma where I felt so safe, oh my gosh, to go back there as an adult and remember all that, it was really a tearful experience for me. I would just, I would write, and then I would print it out and read it when no one was home. And I mean, I would just sob, and it would just felt real, but it was a good kind of feeling, because it was like, I never got to grieve her passing. Our life just got so chaotic, and I never was able to grieve that. And I didn't have a strong parenting that knew how to help us with that either. So we just had to just put it behind us and go on,
Right.
So it just helped me process all that grief all those years later. And so that was really good about it. And then the other hard part, like, that was hard in a good way, but then the other hard part was just going back to, like, the struggles of my parents, and the alcoholism and the violence that incurred, and trying to figure out how much of that do I need to tell, because I didn't even want that to be part of my book originally. I only want to talk about my grandma. It's just, I just want to stay here. But it didn't make sense for, how much she meant to me. People were like, well, why did you want to go there all the time? What was wrong with your own house? That kind of thing. And so I had to tell the whole story so that it made sense why I depended on her so much, and why I believed, that she was with me in spirit throughout my life.
Yeah. And did you, I'm sorry, I'm asking all the questions. If other people have questions, please jump in. But I'm wondering, like, because it is memoir, how your family reacted to it. Because I know that as a poet, when I'm writing stuff, sometimes my family will read a poem, or I'm not sure how they're going to react to something that I've written like that, especially about a particularly difficult subject. So I'm wondering how your family has reacted to your book.
My siblings were all great with it. They were fine. They all read the drafts as they went along. The last one to read it was my mom, and that was the one I was most concerned about, because there's a lot of sensitive stuff in there about her, and she's in a good place now. And I didn't want to do anything to disturb that. And so I approached her about reading it. I told her that I had written this memoir. And so she agreed to read it. And then afterwards, she was just nothing but supportive of it. I think she understood that, you know, that was a way for me to heal. And so she's been really wonderful about it.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
And was there, I know during the editing process, this is the whole thing, you know, you have sometimes the old trope is you have to kill your darlings. Did you have to take out sections of the book that you really wanted in there, but just didn't for some reason?
Yes, the one that I most wanted in there was the Halloween chapter. The one that I performed at the Red Jacket, you know, it's so condensed because of the time. That chapter was very different actually, and really dealt with you know, my sibling life and all that, the full chapter. And that didn't make it in there. And I wanted that in there so badly because that was one of those memories that it just, what transpired in that chapter. I don't know why, but it just went right through my heart that I didn't defend my grandma when those kids said something about her. This is, you guys won't know what that's about, but
Yeah.
Marty does. And I mean, some kids said, called my grandma a witch, and because she lived by herself and her home was kind of old and not very well kept, you know. And so it was on Halloween. And so it just devastated me that I didn't have the courage to stand up for her. And I carried that with me my whole life, you know.
Yeah.
And I really wanted that chapter in the book, but it didn't make it. So I'm glad I got to do at least, you know, an adaptation of it in Red Jacket.
Yeah, that was really a wonderful chapter that you read. I remember that's the one that stuck with me out of the two pieces that you read. It was the Halloween chapter, and then when I read your book afterward, the Mason House, and the Halloween chapter wasn't in there, I was like, wait, where is that? Where is that chapter? So yeah,
it was in there. Yeah, there were
okay.
3 chapters that didn't make it in there. The wood stove, the Halloween chapter, and then there was a chapter that really focused on my stepdad. Because I tried, if I said anything, if I revealed anything negative about a member of my family, I really tried to follow that up in some way with an explanation of why maybe that occurred. You know, why did they become an alcoholic, or why did they do this behavior? And so that chapter did not get in there. And I kind of regret that too, because I really wanted to address that for my stepdad. He's probably the one character that didn't have that opportunity. And I mean, I loved my stepdad. He was, you know, my biological father died before I turned 4. So I only have teeny little glimpses of memory of him. My stepdad was my dad. You know, my whole life still is considered my dad. So I have a father and I have a dad, you know.
Yeah. So, do you have a question?
Well,
Yeah.
I have now this is not such a serious comment, but you still have that Barbie? You got that Barbie, don't you?
Oh, and that is in my book. So
Well,
I have a reproduction. My sister gave me a reproduction of that Barbie.
Oh, just
Yes.
let me say that I managed for her entire life to never give our daughter a Barbie, which is all she ever wanted. I think
my
she still
goodness.
resents me for that reason, but it doesn't seem to have ruined you or your life, so maybe it would have been okay. I'll get her one this Christmas.
There you go.
Think it ruined our daughter's life either. So it you know, the consequences weren't as dire as they might have been.
Yeah.
Malibu Barbie. Wow. Yeah, I remember my sisters and their Barbies when they would get them. The Christmas Barbie every year, you know, for
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, don't tell our daughter, Marty.
You know what my publisher did? This is pretty amazing. They went out onto eBay and found a real vintage Malibu Barbie
Wow.
and used it in the promo photos.
Wow.
Cool.
Isn't that cool? I just thought
That
was
is really
so
cool.
Yeah, I did a lot of really cool personal touches, and that was one of them.
Yeah. So Marie, I think I would have been drummed out of my interviewing skills here if I didn't ask, what are you working on now? What are we looking forward to? What's coming out from you?
Okay, I am not working on anything long form right now. I'm only
Okay.
doing short form writing, and
Okay.
I'm doing some editing, and I'm really the book really showed me about another side of me that I wasn't very much in touch with because we didn't grow up near we didn't grow up on the reservation. We
Mhm.
grew up in Houghton County, and my mom had kind of left that part of her life behind her. And so being able to write this, it allowed me to open myself up to learning about that side of my culture and learning about those grandparents that I didn't have a lot of knowledge
Mhm.
about. And
Mhm.
so I'm really studying my culture right now. I'm very active in that. And so I'm not sure, it's getting close to time to start working on another book if I'm going to do that. But I also have this thing in my mind where I'd like to go and get my Anishinaabe studies degree. So
Mm.
I'm kind of weighing that, you know.
Okay. All
But
right.
yes, but if I do, it will be a fiction piece.
Oh, it will be fiction. Yeah.
Yes, I believe so.
Are you going to leave memoir now that you've done that? You don't want to do that again, or?
Um, I did my whole life in that book. I mean, it was
Yeah.
short, but I did my whole life. So I feel like I don't know what else I want to say about my
Mm-hmm.
life, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we can look forward to an edition of the Mason House with those 3 chapters that you left out. That's what it could be. It could be the unabridged edition of the
Yes,
Mason House.
exactly. The missing chapters.
Oh, well,
Or maybe I was just going to say, maybe you can do the film script for when they decide to make it into a movie.
there you
Oh,
go.
I know. I'm just
Yeah.
waiting for someone to offer that. Or even an audiobook. I really would love an audiobook. So it sounds like I'm just waiting for someone to offer to make an audiobook out of it even, you know.
That would be
Oh, you'd be a
that
good
would be
reader. You
awesome.
should volunteer for it.
Yeah,
Thank you. Baby
absolutely.
steps. Baby steps.
Oh, well, you know what, Marie, I really want to thank you. This has been really, really wonderful
Thank you.
tonight. And just I think a really great way to celebrate the holiday season, hearing you read those sections from your book. And I love the Kalamazoo too. Stoking that I hauled wood for my dad's wood furnace when
Did
I was a
you?
kid. So, oh yeah, all the time. So yeah, I was right there with you. I hated it. I hated it. So well, everybody here, I know everybody here, but just want to let you know a couple things that are upcoming. We have a couple concerts next week. We have one on Monday, which is Cool Up Jazz is doing a Christmas concert, and that's going to be live streamed. And then on Tuesday, as part of we're doing a whole series of on Louisa May Alcott, Marie, at the library for Christmas. And
Oh,
yeah, so next Tuesday we have a Louisa May Alcott scholar who's going to be talking about Alcott's life and writing and things like that, which will be wonderful. Then next Wednesday we have another concert, and it's Jerry Yantz actually from the Red Jacket Jamboree. He and his son are coming and doing Yantz guitar duo, the 12 Strings of Christmas.
oh my
So that'll be really wonderful. And then the big one is next on December 20th, there's going to be a live streamed performance of Little Women by local actors. So that's all upcoming this month. And then, of course, we have authors reading virtually next month that we have to look forward to. And it's going to be our very own Milton Bates who's going to be doing a reading. So lots of really great things upcoming. So yes. So again, thank you, Marie. Thank you, Christine, for coming, and Milton, Puck. It was nice to see you all.
Thank you all for coming. Make witch. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you,
All
Marty.
right. All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
bye.